The rotors were already screaming when the helicopter fishtailed across my private runway, like a shopping cart on black ice, skidded off the asphalt, and folded into my corn. With a sigh that felt like justice, catching its breath. People in linen yelled champagne hit the dirt, and Sarah Nelson in her red blazer shouted, "Who made the runway slippery?" Right as an FAA agent stepped to my shoulder and said, in the calmest voice I've heard in a year, "Ma'am, this is a federally registered private airfield, owned by Mount Brandon Green." I didn't grin, not yet, because it took months of swallowing pride to get to that one clean moment where arrogance met gravity and lost. You know what I mean. I'm Brandon Green, 55, retired engineer. I built that 2,000-foot strip behind my barn back when crop dusting still paid the bills. FAA paperwork in a binder, a sign at the fence that reads, B. Green Airfield. Private use only coordinates etched in my memory, like the smell of diesel at dawn. And for years, the only traffic was crows, a medivac drill now and then, and the wind coming straight down the valley from Whitmore. Then Sarah arrived with the newly minted Whitmore HOA, Gates golf carts, newsletters that read like commandments, and a smile that said, "Control is a love language." First, it was a yardstake by my mailbox that declared, "Future site of Whitmore Landing. Private jet access for residents." Then a Cessna slid onto my numbers like it paid rent. The pilot waved as if I were ground crew, and Sarah stepped down in her pearls and coral blazer and said, "Brandon, relax. It's an amenity zone. Now you'll be compensated." And I said, "You mean trespassing?" And she said, "Property values go up when you cooperate." The kind of line people say when they think confidence equals permission. I didn't fight on the lawn. I went quiet. Certified mail with a cease and desist. FAA registration photocopied 3 times county plat pulled from a drawer. Then I did the thing. Folks underestimate, because it isn't loud, I documented. 4 trail cams disguised as fence posts. Entrance, mid-runway. Far threshold, corn, edge timestamps burned into the corner, like a second opinion that never blinks. I posted a new sign, private airfield, no air access. And 2 days later it vanished, so I posted another and watched the footage. 6:47 a.m. Sunglasses and gardening gloves. Sarah herself, tugging the post out and sliding it into her trunk like she was doing me a favor. And that right there was my twist. Not sabotage, not gotcha, just sunlight with a timestamp. With a Whitmore newsletters puffed up exclusive air access minutes. From clubhouse glossy flyers with my barn in the background, and fines started appearing in crisp envelopes. $500 for noise abatement violation, visible from Whitmore, which is a sentence that only makes sense if you think the law is a mood board. So I called Deputy Miller, old boot leather, and fairness in his voice, and he said, "Touching down here is trespass, but if they waive a zoning overlay, it gets messy." Then, I emailed an FAA compliance agent. A neighbor put me in touch with Agent Morrison, attached tail numbers. Stills that overlay, map-stamped, draft in the corner, and she wrote back, "Keep your runway clearly marked, keep recording, notify us if they advertise another event." So I repainted the thresholds, big reflective letters at both ends. Private, no air access, the sort of message you can read from bad decisions away. I put my FAA registration number under the main sign, and I kept my mouth shut because patience is the farmer's best tool and arrogance's worst enemy, yeah. That happened. The grand opening invite landed on a Thursday, Whitmore HOA helicopter. Showcase Sunday, 9:00 a.m. Coordinates that matched my asphalt like they'd stolen them off my mailbox. I forwarded it to Agent Morrison, and to the sheriff didn't throw a tantrum. Set the cameras to motion, plus continuous, and backed up to a drive in my workshop. Drank coffee. Slept fine. Sunday came on cool and silver dew, low in the corn. SUVs nosed along my fence. A live stream, spun up with smiles, and words like elevating the community. Sarah found me at the boundary stake and said, "So glad you could join us, Brandon. This puts Whitmore on the map." And I pointed at the line in the ground and said, "It's already on the map." And she laughed and said, "You can't stop progress." And I said I prefer consent. And she waved her clipboard like a wand and walked away. The Bell 407 dropped in around 9:06. Rotor wash cleared the dust, and those big white letters flashed for every phone camera. Private, no air access, but Spectacle loves an encore. The pilot went for a showy touch and go shallow on the skids. Wet morning sheen, a quick overcorrection, and that machine slid sideways, like the world had turned to glass. Into the corn it went. Nobody hurt, pride dented beyond repair. And right there, Sarah shouted the meme the internet was waiting for. "Who made the runway slippery?" And I said, "Not me." And Agent Morrison stepped up and asked, "Ma'am, do you have written permission from the property owner to operate aircraft here?" And Sarah lifted her clipboard like a shield and said, "It's community. Property, we have an overlay." And the agent said, "The overlay is a draft. The registration is private use only. You've been running unauthorized aircraft operations without owner consent." And the faces behind her started changing color in a way that says dues and liability in the same breath. We didn't scream, we read. I handed over the binder. 12 landings in 4 weeks logged by time, tail number, and tread marks, trail cam stills, of her sign theft at 6:47 a.m. Screenshots of flyers. Even a ribbon-cut photo on my runway, and the agent issued a stop operations order. On the spot, seized the pop-up runway lights for review, and told the board they'd be answering formal questions under oath. You could feel the HOA oxygen thinning, as folks realized you can't vote your way past federal jurisdiction. That night, the board called an emergency meeting. I sat second row with my lawyer, Ava Carter, a file of facts in her lap, and the expression of a woman who believes paper over posture every time the secretary read a memo from the FAA that didn't care how nice your landscaping is. Draft overlay unauthorized aircraft use trespass documentation provided by owner. And when Sarah opened her mouth to call it a smear, homeowners in linen asked about refunds. Insurance, forged maps, and fines. The treasurer moved to remove Sarah as president, effective immediately, and to refer potential civil exposure to council hands. Went up like wheat in a steady wind. Not a riot, just a return to gravity. The secretary set Sarah's key fob and nameplate in a banker's box, and that was it. No drum roll. Just the sound a room makes when a trick is done. I didn't celebrate. I went home. Patched a fence post. The helicopter had kinked, poured coffee, and sat on my porch with Luis, my friend from the old hangar days, who said, "You didn't humiliate her. She did that to herself and brought a crowd." And I said, "That's the thing about boundaries. They're quiet until they're ignored, and then they're loud. In ways you can't spin." And if you're wondering about sabotage, there wasn't any no soap on asphalt, no booby traps, just paint signs, certified letters, and a camera that told the same story every time. The county kept asking for interviews. I passed most of them along because fame doesn't fix fences, and I had rows to walk. But one line made the news, and I stand by it. You can't build your convenience on top of someone else's consent and call it community. You either have permission or you don't. And if you're waiting for the tidy movie ending, the only bow I'll tie is this small twist that still makes me laugh months back before any of this my old FAA paperwork had quietly kept my strip listed for auxiliary emergency use. Which means, while Sarah was selling my Horizon to brunch, the federal file already said, hands off unless the owner or the feds say otherwise. So that's the story beginning to end. A runway. A president who thought confidence was a key. A binder that outlasted a bluff, rotors winding down over a cornfield that grows back no matter who's pretending to own the sky. And now, I'm going to ask you something that actually matters, because this isn't just about airplanes or HOAs. It's about the line between progress and permission. If your neighborhood told you their vision required your property, would you rent it, fight it, or try to meet in the middle? And what exactly does the middle look like when the law says no? Drop your take in the comments. Argue with me if you want. Tell me the most ridiculous rule you've been fined for, and the neighbor who stood up for you when it counted. And if you want more real stories, where entitlement meets a boundary and the truth lands clean, hit like, hit subscribe, and tell me your city and local time, so I know where you're watching from.